Main Street Media Utah. This is Talk with John right here on MainStreetMediaUtah.com. Looking forward to being with you for the next 2 hours. I will be introducing my guests momentarily, but as usual, I like to do my opening show prayer and my opening show mantra. But first, let's get the show off to a proper start. This is Talk with John, like I said, on Main Street Media Utah, KMMU, and looking forward to having my guest joining me shortly. A great way to interact with me during the show, also before and after the show, is on Talk with John 1. That's Talk with JON 1. It's also a way that you can say, hey, John, I really want you with the political guests that you're having coming on, those that are running for office. I'd like you to ask these questions of your guests. The questions that I've got a bunch of questions that I put together that have been asked of guests over the years. I've got a list of them that I'll be going through, and I'll introduce that in just a moment. But first, as I said, let's get this show off to a proper start. Today's date is Tuesday, April 9th, 2024. And I want to give out, before we get rolling, I want to give out my show prayer and my show mantra. I hope my show is a gift back. No need to bow your head, close your eyes. It's just a prayer in my heart. I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may it be an acceptable token to our Father above. Then the show mantra: where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty. And the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be. All right, so I flubbed that one up. I can't believe it. I did it. I do it every once in a while. So right now, for joining me as a guest, I have the privilege to have running for Attorney General of the state of Utah, Frank Mylar. Frank, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, John. It's good to be here.
It is great to have you on board. Okay, so folks, I'm going to say, do I dare say this? I bring on candidates and I reach out to candidates that I feel are worth bringing before my audiences, if that makes sense. There are some people that I will not bring on and I will not reach out to. Now, if someone reaches out to me who is running for political office, if it's a state office, or if it's a state office or a federal office, there's a good chance that I'm going to do my best to get you on and honor that and run you through the gauntlet of questions. But I have had some people that are running for office of one of those twos that I've just mentioned that will only come on for 20 minutes. And I've said, how in the world can I be fair to my audience by only giving them 20 minutes when everybody else is willing to give me a certain period of time? 20 minutes allows me to get through very few questions. But Frank Mylar is willing to come on. I know that he's on the radar of a number of people. And folks, I think he is well worth your consideration for Attorney General. That being said, I'm not endorsing him, but I am definitely saying he is worth consideration. And I am grateful, Frank, for you joining me here today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Here's what I'd like you to do is just give a quick synopsis of who you are, non-running it for Attorney General. Just like a little bit about, a lot of people would go like, who's Talk with John? I happen to be a husband and father of 5. Well, husband of 1, father of 5. And I happen to be, I consider myself a conservative Christian. And, I do business to business sales for work. So, Frank, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, it sounded like you were telling my background. I'm a Christian and I'm a father of 5. I've been married 36 years. All of my kids have graduated from college. By God's grace, all of them are solid conservatives, and 3 of them are married to solid conservatives, which becomes a harder and harder thing these days.
So how many do you have married again? Or how many children do you have?
I have 5 children, and 3 of them are married.
3 of them are married so far.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Congratulations.
And one of them was just a few weeks ago in Phoenix, Arizona. And yes, I missed the Washington County Convention because I was in Phoenix during that time. So it's one of the liabilities of sometimes you already have things planned. It had been planned for a year and a half. And so, yeah.
Okay, your child got married. Is that what I understood?
Yes, my son, I adopted a son from Ukraine, my wife and I, several years ago, and he's just done fantastic. um, and yeah, he went to Grand Canyon University there in Phoenix, which is an excellent school, a private for-profit school that gives its money back to the school. And the feds don't like it because it's undermining Arizona State University students.
Good, good, good.
So
Actually, I've heard a lot of good things about Grand Canyon State University. I've heard a lot of good things about it. Um, all right, so let's do this. I'm going to run you through the gauntlet of 23 questions. Plus, because you're running for Attorney General, I have a couple additional questions that I want to ask you that is specific to your race.
great.
So here's what I'm going to ask you. Keep this in mind. We probably want to keep the answers in general 1 to 2 minutes. Now, also, I guarantee you're going to start giving answers to questions, and they'll probably be answers to questions that I'll wind up asking. So we
Right.
may skip through. So I will hit that specific question. I will bring it up, and I'll say, I think you already answered it. If you have any additional thoughts that you want to mention, feel free to restate your position or something along those lines. So thank you so much for being willing to come on the Talk with John show here on KMMU. Now, real quickly, to those that are following us over X or might be on our website, you can reach us. Now, you can go to our website. You can go, which is KMMU or Main Street Media Utah, KMMU org.org, sorry, kmmu.org. Slow down, John. We're also live on X, YouTube, and Rumble, and you can find us at those locations. Also, the phone number is 385-899-2134. 385-899-2134. Now, I've had a few callers, and especially on Talk with John on K Talk, I have a tendency to have callers that will call in and not stick to the points at hand. So I'm going to say here, bottom line, stick to the topics at hand, folks, if you do call in. And we are more than happy to take your calls. I guarantee you Frank's more than willing to take your calls. So let's start with the first question.
Great.
What qualifies you for running for office of Attorney General for the state of Utah?
Oh, I appreciate that. One, I often say I have trusted experience. That is that the people I'm running against don't have nearly the experience I have. I have 36 years of actually practicing law in the trenches, 12 years in most areas of the Attorney General's office, so I know the office inside and out. But also litigating, protecting sheriffs across the state. And this is the most important thing. Why is it trusted experience? Because that's experience, right? Well, it's trusted because I have been busy protecting people's constitutional rights without charge. I'm an honor guard attorney with Alliance Defending Freedom, which is the premier organization that is defending our rights. They argued the abortion pill drug against it a couple weeks ago in the Supreme Court. And the fact that I've been doing this day in and day out, I've gone down to the legislature many times, acting like an attorney general, testifying for or against bad bills. I've also, you can even look, I found this in the paper, but in 2013, they credited, the Tribune credited that Frank Mylar is holding up a bill that would have damaged parental rights. And they literally said that it put the skids on that bill because I had sent emails and a legal opinion and testified on that bill. And they said they're not moving it forward. This was the Speaker of the House, quoted the Tribune, we're not moving it forward till we analyze all the issues raised by Frank Mylar. So what I'm saying is I've already been doing this kind of a thing, and I'm anxious to do more than I've been doing in that kind of a position.
Okay. So right now, there is not someone that is going to be, the person holding the office is not running for office.
Correct.
But there are several other candidates running for office. A number of them have all told me they deserve to be the office holder. So I'm going to ask you, why should we choose Frank?
Excellent. Well, again, it's kind of a little bit of the repeat of what I just said. Um, Two of them have barely practiced law at all. One's not even licensed to practice in Utah, and he only practiced in Boston in 2009 through 2011. The other gentleman practiced in Washington, D.C. about 1 to 2 years, and then been a lobbyist and a politician. He's worked for Bennett. He hardly says that. He works for Bennett. He works for Hatch. Then he worked as deputy personnel director for Mike Lee. So those two, honestly, I don't know why they're running, because it makes a mockery of the attorney general office. The next person is Rachel Terry. She has some decent experience. She has way more experience than the other two candidates, but then I have far more than she does, because of all the candidates, I'm the only one that's actually prosecuted criminals. I'm the only one that's actually defended criminal charges falsely brought, and I vindicated sidewalk counselors in Salt Lake City when they were prosecuted criminally for exercising their First Amendment rights. And so if you look at all the other candidates, none of them have criminal law experience. Two, none of them actually have filed a constitutional claim in court for people like are listening to this program. It's zero. And so my feeling is, if you're an attorney, if you're a legislator, you want to know what you voted on, right? If you're an attorney, you should say, well, what have you done to promote constitutional principles when you weren't getting paid, and when it wasn't for somebody else? And so they have zero examples of actually helping people vindicate constitutional rights, pay or no pay, but certainly not. They've never done it without pay.
Okay, so I'm going to give you kind of a counter to that.
Great.
And my question is, this is a constitutional position, attorney general, right? My understanding, and I'm going to be completely transparent on this one.
Good.
I do not believe that the sheriffs in the state of Utah should not be required to have gone through post or whatever it is. I believe it's a constitutional position, and they should just, anyone who runs for the Constitution or runs for sheriff should be able to say, I'm going to be sheriff, as long as they qualify legally under the law. Now, the law has recently been changed and altered in the state of Utah that you must be, I think, go through post training.
Post. You mean post certified?
And my opinion is, I think it's wrong. It shouldn't happen. I want to get someone that believes in the Constitution, and I don't think that is a necessity. That's my opinion with Attorney General as well. Now, I'm not saying that it isn't good to have, but my opinion when it comes to the sheriff, as well as when it comes to the Attorney General, you have the Attorney General has many attorneys underneath him. What is most important that position, in my opinion, is the executive actions and being an executive and saying, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to prioritize. This is what I want to help protect, and so on and so forth. Your thoughts to that, because I know that's a counter, and I want to make sure we get that question asked.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, because that's what these two guys are basically going to say. And the problem is, would you like to follow a guy into battle that's leading you when he's never fired a shot in battle? There's no respect in the office. Part of that office is actually leading the office. And so I'm the only one that's actually managed attorneys inside the AG's office and outside the AG's office. But the fact that I'm the only one that's had jury trials, the only one that's argued before the Utah Supreme Court, the only one that's filed numerous briefs without charging at the U.S. Supreme Court and argued before the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, that gives me battle experience. And so when you're talking about somebody that's going to follow constitutional principles, it's easy as pie to look at that attorney and say, what is his record like? And so the fact that what you're saying conceptually makes some sense, but how are you going to know whether they really actually care about any constitutional issues? Because the three people I'm running against, they've never been in the trenches fighting these wars. But you can name an important issue. Hobby Lobby, I joined in that group, and that was a very important religious freedom issue against Obamacare, for a corporation to exercise its religious freedom rights as a corporation. That's what was hugely important about that case. Protecting religious counselors in California when they're being silenced regarding sexual confusion and could lose their license if they say anything that might be against it. Testifying on those same bills in Utah, free of charge, not as a paid lobbyist representing Facebook like one of my competitors, but actually there as a citizen, representing those rights. So what I have done uniquely as an attorney is the kind of thing that I think people want in an attorney general. And so the reason it's trusted experience is because of that. But I also will say this: I have a master's in business administration. I know how to lead, and I know how I've had a very successful law firm for 24 years, a private law firm. And so those things help. But how do you know as a voter whether the attorney general is just smoke and mirrors in his speeches or whether he's actually going to accomplish something worthwhile? You look at their track record, and that's what's essential, because going forward, how do you know they're really going to go forward? The reason you know I'm going to go forward, because I've already been fighting pro-life issues. I've already been fighting the feds. I've been, these issues that are important. Immigration. I worked with the Immigration Law Institute from Washington, D.C. So you name the issue, I've already been fighting them. That's why people can confidently say, okay, this guy's experience really shows he's in the weeds. He's in the trenches fighting and shooting back, trying to take back lost ground. And it's not just theoretical. And so the two people, and really the other three in the race, it's theoretical. They don't have any battle experience.
Okay. Excellent answer. Excellent answer. Thank you. As the office holder of, I don't know if that's the proper term, but let's say you are voted in as Attorney General for the state of Utah.
Your voice is dropped out. Just
my voice dropped down. How about now? Did it pick back up?
Better. That's better.
Oh my gosh. So I've got this mic that should be picking me up, and maybe it's not close enough. And
it's working now.
The mic just fell. The mic stand just fell. So I'm gonna have to mute myself. All right, here we go on the next question.
Great.
As the office holder for Attorney General, and then I'm going to mute myself, and I may even take me off camera because I got to do a little technical work behind the scenes. Like
I'll just keep talking.
Put the stand up. What is the most important thing you would do as Attorney General? What is the most important thing you do?
Absolutely. There's really four things that are just all coming together on me in a huge way. One, I'm going to lead out on protecting women's sports and bathrooms without exceptions. I do not like the exceptions. I do not like certain free speech prohibitions in that law, and I will fight that because that's something I was fighting with Alliance Defending Freedom. And so that's one thing. The second is this immigration problem, working to stop flights, making it illegal, coordinating with sheriffs to arrest anyone that brings illegal aliens into this state. We've got to shut the faucet off on this in a major way. I want to go to the legislature and prohibit cities like Salt Lake City and other cities from declaring themselves sanctuary cities, which has happened. Now, so that's two. The other thing is fighting the feds. I'm already fighting the feds. I'm actively fighting the feds in litigation, but it's something that I believe needs a full court press. We've got to protect our ranchers. We've got to protect the right of law enforcement to enforce the laws on every square inch of their county and not get kicked off by the feds who don't really care about enforcing the law. So there's also other things like the Department of Justice. It's in Davis County, and it's in Davis County seemingly because the AG's office or somebody has let them in. I know how I can get them out because I've got them out of prisons, and I fought that issue on the prison context. It's the same thing. It's no difference fighting to get them out of your school. They have no business there. This is another federal overreach that I will be fighting. Finally, the fourth issue is making sure our elections can be trusted. I have been concerned for a long time about the willy-nilly mail-in ballots where there's simply no verification whatsoever. It's one of the biggest sources of fraud. Plus, as we increase in technology, we need to put the brakes on this until we can absolutely verify and audit instantaneously. while people are voting, and that it can't be manipulated or changed. Until we do that, I want us to use paper. And honestly, the caucuses was a great example of a disaster of technology. Most people had the same experience I had. I would not have gotten to my caucus if, in fact, someone didn't do it the old-fashioned way and said, "Okay, just show me your ID card and your voter card," because I registered 2 weeks ahead, didn't get the email. Surprise. And guess what? I could never get on that night. They said, "Oh, you just need to go back online." The problem was I was already pre-registered. And I think that it never would allow me to give them this little, sign or something, QR code or something that you're supposed to get. And so this should be a wake-up call. And because of it, I've asked for paper ballots at the state convention. And so I think that more candidates need to do that. I don't know if very many even have done that. So sorry, that's probably went overtime on that, but those are really 4 passions of mine to fight.
Well, we will be coming back on a few of the things that you said. So trust me, we'll be diving down the rabbit hole on a few of those.
Great.
So, when was the last time you read? I'm going to say 2 things: the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of the state of Utah.
All right. Well, I was just asked that earlier today, and I will tell you, it's been a few years. I have actually read through them. I've
A few
actually
years on both, or
a few years on both.
Okay.
Mhm. Yes, and but I have read through them all, which I know a lot of lawyers actually don't do that. I'm not going to lie or fudge it. It's been a few years, like probably 10 years, to be honest with you. But I do actively litigate both things under the Utah Constitution as well as things under the United States Constitution. I've actively been litigating these things for over 30 years in the courts. And so once in a while, I start looking at Article 3 courts. So I'll look up a particular area because I think they've overrun their jurisdiction here, and I want to get this case kicked out because they don't have Article 3 standing. Is
Okay,
the
so you
argument?
have read from the Constitution. You may not have read it all the way through, but
Oh
you've
yeah.
read from the Constitution fairly recently. Then is
Oh,
what I'm
absolutely.
understanding.
Oh, it several times in a year. I mean,
Okay,
yeah.
so I think that's a very good qualifier, is to say, hey, I've read from certain parts of the Constitution. I go back to it on a regular basis. I think that's very fair. Okay, so thank you for your answer. Uh, is it? And I'm going to probably hit this a few times. Is it the place? This came from COVID. Is it the place for government to have American citizens if there was a death rate of, say, like 10%? Is it the place of government to shut down citizens' interaction, commerce, going out of their home, going to church, and things along those lines? Is it the place for government to do that?
Absolutely not. And one of the things that struck me about COVID right after it started coming out in March and April of 2020 was this is not a very deadly disease. And the people that it was taking, that were dying were actually very, very elderly and often with comorbidities. And so this was just shocking to me. And you know what my first thought was? If they're doing it can you imagine like this? Can you imagine if it was more deadly? And this is huge issue because there's all this information, and the government took it on themselves to be Big Brother, and really in a 1984, the book by George Orwell, kind of a Big Brother way. It was outrageous. I actually got involved in fighting this. This is what the Attorney General's office should have done. They should have come out and spoken against some of these nonsense measures, but he didn't. So some people just suffered along in different ways. But some people called me because they know I'm a constitutional attorney that fights these things. So I got calls from churches. Can we meet? And Christian schools. Can we still go to school? And I said to both, absolutely, because you're exercising your First Amendment rights of religious expression. And 2, this is a law that applies to a public accommodation. That is not what you are. Churches and schools, private schools, are private organizations, and it didn't even apply to them. But nobody Nobody was leading out on this, and I don't know any, I know the other candidates absolutely were not. Here's another thing that distinguished me. Alliance Defending Freedom that I mentioned earlier, that I'm honor guard attorney with, because I earned that status in helping people.
Okay, so you've said that organization's name a couple of times. Let's talk about who they are.
Yes.
Because I'm going to guarantee you there's a few of my listeners that are not familiar with that organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just finish what they did, and then I'll get back to that. Is that okay?
Done.
Great.
Done.
So Alliance Defending Freedom called me up, and they said, Frank, can you help people get religious exemptions to the COVID vaccine? And this was particularly right after Biden said all healthcare organizations have to have everyone vaccinated in the entire company. And I'm going to tell you that some of these people were out of state, and some of them, it was like I was fighting the ACLU in getting this. They were asking for totally inappropriate information. You name it, it was outrageous. But I will like to say, by God's grace, everyone I helped got the religious exemption, including my daughter, who's a nurse at Primary Children's Hospital. And to their credit,
Wow.
they gave me the least amount of problem of anyone. They also let her out of the flu vaccine and all other vaccines. She's a very healthy 20-something nurse, and she also did her own research. She found out that it affects women's menstrual cycles, and it could affect her ability to get pregnant one day, which is very important to her for religious reasons. She really wants to be able to have a family someday, and didn't want anything like the COVID vaccine to throw a wrench into that. But Alliance Defending Freedom, I'm glad you have it on here. People need to know about this organization. It's in Scottsdale, Arizona. And let me just tell you, first they train attorneys, because they were started in 1994 to battle against the ACLU, especially with respect to religious expression and religious freedom and free speech rights related to those kinds of discussions in the public square. The ACLU and others were trying to shove us all into our closets and act like there can be no expression in colleges, in classrooms, in the city council meeting, you name it. They were trying to close it down. So former Justice Department people under Ed Meese and Ronald Reagan, actually in the Reagan administration, they're the ones that started this. People like Alan Sear, Benjamin Bull, really experienced litigators. And they had an awesome vision. They grouped together numerous different groups: American Family Association, American Center for Law and Justice. You name the organization. They said, we got to do something about this. And they started funding it. They started very aggressively funding, because one, they have trained attorneys that will fight. Two, they train attorneys like me that fight where they can't do the fight, because they can't be everywhere at once, right? And three, they actually give you grants from time to time, which I've been sometimes the recipient of those grants in fighting some of these cases. But they're also just an amazing organization. I think in general, the people are amazing, and they help all the time. So we've gone to schools that were denying free speech rights for conservative and religious organizations here in Utah. And I'm their boots on the ground person. So they always copy these letters they send out, and it says Frank Mylar, ADF attorney. I don't work for them. I don't get a dime of wages from them. My work is volunteer. It's actually fighting these battles, and I fought a lot of them. And so I love this organization. I really want people to go to adflegal.org and just search it out, and just ask yourself, hey, do we want one of these guys to be our attorney general?
Well, folks, speaking of asking questions, please do go to their website. It is adflegal.org. That's Alliance for Defending Freedom. Also, if you have any questions you'd like to ask Frank, the phone number is 385-899-2134, 385-899-2134. Now, a lot of times, we do not have a lot. From most of my shows, I don't have callers. They just want to listen in. So we've got still roughly 18 more questions to go through.
All right.
Okay. So one of the reasons why I asked that question, and I really appreciate what you gave, kind of where that question came from, and I want to give him a little bit of credit, is Dan Cottom. Dan Cottom is a doctor that ran as a libertarian for governor. And right at the beginning of COVID, right at the beginning of lockdown, I asked him that question: do you think it makes sense for government to lock down businesses and so forth? And he said, well, I said, he goes, no, not right now. Definitely not right now. It doesn't make any sense. And I said, okay, so what if there's a 10% death rate? And he said, I think maybe that'd be okay.
Wow.
All right. All right. But remember, he's a doctor, right? So his job is and he goes, so I had him back on about a month and a half later. And he goes, John asked me that question. I want you to ask me that question
He did
again.
more research.
And he goes, John, I was absolutely wrong. He goes, I must admit, I had my not only candidate hat, but I had my doctor hat.
Mhm.
As a doctor, we always say you need to take this long for recovery. That's because we want to make sure you recover, when sometimes you could push it a little bit more. He goes, I
Yep.
had my doctor's hat on. But he
Yep.
goes, John, the bottom line is, he goes, if there was 90% death, it is not the proper place for government to shut things down. He goes, guess what? Based on the numbers, and I remember listening to the Ben Shapiro a couple times on this.
Yeah.
He talked, and this is when he was living in California, and he was like, I'm able to get in the office finally. I'm able to go 65 miles an hour down the freeway on the 405 during the middle of the day. And he goes, something that was never done. That goes to show you, people will censor themselves. They will take themselves, and they will mitigate their own risk based on their own decisions. And
Yeah.
so I am going to give, that's where that question came from. And I do appreciate your answer, because I feel very much the way you do, very similar to the way you do on that.
Well, and I think it was Benjamin Franklin that said, if you trade safety and security for liberty, you'll have neither.
You'll get neither.
And
Okay. Very well stated. Okay, folks. Now, just a little bit, John, stepping aside real quickly. Um, I am. I've got a little bit of I've got bad allergies. Bottom line, so I'm gonna probably be muting myself. You've probably seen me coughing, and I may even be muting clearing the screen, because no one wants to see me blow my nose. I mean, no one wants to see that. But so forgive me, folks. I'm doing my best to hang in there, and I'm really grateful to Frank for helping carry, because we ought to make this the Frank Mylar show, running for Attorney General today, here on Talk with John. So remember, folks, you can go to KMMU.org, and also feel free to call in at 385-899-2134. Okay, Frank, we've got some more questions. Like I said,
Great.
we've got 18 left of my official questions, and then I've got a few more that are specific to the Attorney General office.
Great.
When a group of persons asks you to support a position, to support a bill, and I realize you're not running legislation, but when someone asks you, hey, I want you to stand behind this bill, how do you make that decision on whether you're going to stand behind it? Your reasoning, how would you go about making that decision?
Absolutely. First of all, it's not going to be a lobbyist decision. It's not going to be somebody that just is a government official, or even a legislator. I'm going to want to know, are they coming from a constitutional perspective? I'm going to know the impact of that bill upon the liberties of each family, similar to Ronald Reagan, who said anyone that makes a administrative code, it needs to take the impact on the family into account. I don't think they did, but that's what he ordered. But I will say this, that I've been called many times by Gail Ruzicka and Eagle Forum and different people like that to go down and
Evil people. Those are such evil people. Those dirty, rotten Eagle Forum. I mean, they do nothing but bad in this state, right?
Well, I love the way they love the Constitution,
Me
and
too.
we are just like-minded as can be. And so when Gail calls and says, Frank, you got to come down and you got to review this law first. We need you to come down and testify in it. I've never seen here, send me a bill and me review it and say, oh, I disagree with you, Gail. I mean, then that's been going on for decades. And so, yeah. And so that's the kind of people who ask me, hey, you need to come in and weigh in on this. And I will say that the vast majority of bills that I go down and testify for or against are ones that impact moral issues, constitutional moral issues. So, for instance, I would include religious freedom, freedom of speech, parental rights, gun rights, but it's actually looking at these constitutional issues. And I come down there with reasoned constitutional issues as to why we should either support or reject this bill. And the example I gave you a little bit ago was a prime example of that, where they were trying to undermine the constitutional rights of a parent and allow someone that lives with them to potentially gain some sort of parental rights standing. So it was a horrendous bill that our legislature was trying to run, and it was about 2013.
Yeah, that's so surprising that that happens. Not really.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, what is your thought on you're going to be facing this a bunch? Trans athletes, you've already mentioned that, and just LGBT issues. Um, how do you mitigate? How do you determine their rights versus the common citizens' rights?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, there's a real trampling of the common citizens' rights, and that's got to stop. And a lot of it's free speech, some of it's pronoun nonsense. Other people should not have to cave and use their terminology when they don't want to. I mean, this shouldn't be some offense. They're trying to make it into somehow you could be actually prosecuted, I think, under one of the bills for not, saying the right politically correct thing. That's
Was
got to
there a
stop.
bill run about that here in the
Yeah, there
state
was
of Utah?
something, I think it was related to the bathroom bill. There's some kind of zingers in there that aren't good. I will work to get rid of those exceptions. Now, I'm going to tell, people can live like they want as long as it's within the law and as long as it doesn't impact the rest of the people, but once you say that, okay, everyone has to call this boy a girl now in school, that's nonsense. Nobody should have to do such things that makes zero sense intellectually or biologically or morally, and so that's where you draw the line. If people that are adults, they can consent and do quite a few things that I wouldn't agree with. People can have their own beliefs. They can teach their children bizarre things. That's their right, but don't start doing operations on a child. Don't start pumping them up with hormones that are contrary to who they are as a
Okay, so I'm
created
going to dive
being.
down. I want to drill down in that a little bit. So, where does parental rights meet um, a parent saying, "I think my child was born a male, but my child has lived their entire life like a female, and I think that it is more than reasonable for me to go to a doctor and get them to their affirmed gender, to use, I believe, the proper language.
Yeah.
Aren't you stepping in on their parental rights?
Yeah, I am, but when it's abuse, that's the time when the state can step in. I actually have a precedent-setting case dealing with terminating parental rights because you know what? Once in a while, it's justified. You start sawing off an arm, you beat a kid and break their arms. You do a whole bunch of surgeries that are completely utterly unjustified and do all these things to a child. It's been known for years that you can't do that. You can't be abusing a child. It is child abuse, pure and simple, to do these kinds of surgeries. And it's not fair because that parent is deciding for that child. And that shouldn't be. That's fine if they want to conceptually say, I'm a boy, and the parent can do whatever they want with that. But once you start crossing the line that you're going to allow them to start cutting on this kid, giving them either mind altering or hormone altering drugs and things, now you've crossed the line because now you're talking about prescriptions and you're talking about a doctor that's prescribing these things when they shouldn't be.
Okay. How would you interact with doctors who believe that they should be able to do that? And if they do that in the state of Utah, and then what if someone leaves the state of Utah to go to say, I mean, this is a case that happened with the Texan. A Texan was divorced from his wife. They got divorced in Texas. and the wife ran off with the child to do a sex change. How do you think that should be handled here in Utah?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a little bit, you've hit a lot of complicated issues. I have dealt with different interstate issues. It's very complicated and very difficult, as we're seeing now with the abortion issue. We're seeing states be radically in favor of abortion to an extreme degree, with any circumstances, and even California proposing that the child could be killed within a certain period of time after giving birth to the child.
And New
Not,
York, and New
yeah,
York,
yeah.
and Democrat, former Democrat governor in Virginia.
But we've also seen in Illinois bills introduced to their legislature that would find it child abuse for a morally minded parent to say, I'm not going to affirm this sexual confusion nonsense. So that is, then they can have a right to actually take the child from that religiously minded parent and take him away. Now, so that, I know I'm mixing some issues here, but I do know that one
I
thing.
guarantee you, if you're the attorney general, we're going to be facing that in the next 4 years.
Yeah,
We're going to have people that they were divorced here in Utah, or one parent says, a state will go after them. A citizen here in the state of Utah will try to litigate them. I
yeah.
guarantee that will happen.
Here's So since I've dealt with interstate custody problems and contempt and stuff, I actually know what legislation would need to be passed. They basically need to make it a felony for a parent to unilaterally decide, in a divorce or these kinds of custody cases, to unilaterally leave the state and go ahead and do these kinds of surgeries. We would have the courts required not to allow that to happen in Utah. So what that would do is they could be extradited. Other states will only extradite back to Utah for felonies. And so they need to make it a felony to do that. And if people know it's a felony and they're going to be extradited, they're going to think twice about grabbing the child and leaving.
Okay. We're on number 8.
Oh, well,
So
I'll
we're
try
not
to go
even
faster.
halfway through, and it's 4:47. Okay, so we may go. I'm predicting we might go a little over 6 o'clock, but I'm going to do my best.
All right.
All right. Should government shut down the private sector for any reason that you can think of?
I can't think of a reason. I honestly can't. I just like to look at what Florida did as compared to California and New York.
And Utah.
And well, I'll tell you that Utah was definitely leaning toward California, a lot more than people would realize. But my daughter was actually going to college in Orlando, and it was the land of the free when we went there during COVID. And places were open. People didn't go bankrupt. The economy was doing well. And you look at New York and California, people went bankrupt, economies tanked, and freedom was restricted. And here in Florida also, they had mandates. DeSantis did a fantastic job as governor. That's all there's to it. He had mandates to the school that you had to listen to the parents. What a concept, right? He fought the federal government in Florida, saying, no, the federal government cannot interfere in when we say that parents are in charge of whether the kids wear a mask or not. So I think that we need to have that kind of resolve in Utah. And I think I can speak out on it, even if our governor and legislature aren't doing their job about it.
I don't think I'll go down that rabbit hole, but I'm just like, I have a lieutenant governor who was my former state Senate representative, and I thought she was darn awesome right up until COVID. And then I had I called her as my state senator. Actually, I will go down the rabbit hole a little bit. I called her up. She happens to have her children go to the same school that my children go to. And I was right there with the equivalent of the superintendent of the schools, and called her up and said, "Hey, I'm sitting in office." She called me back, and I said, "I don't want my children wearing masks." I said, "I've got a child that has asthma issues. I've got another child that her face is breaking out."
Yep.
I go, "If her face is breaking out, in elementary school,
Yes.
young elementary school," I said, "if her face is breaking out on the outside from wearing masks, What's this doing to the inside of her? Can
Oh
you
yeah.
please do something so we don't have to wear masks? And she goes, John, I'm sorry. It's scary. I happened to go to the hospital and I was really scared. And I said, it's not affecting children. This was several weeks into it. So it's good to hear a public official, someone who wants to be a public official, willing to stand up for freedom.
Absolutely.
All right, number 9. In the last so you were a citizen of Utah, correct? In the last 4 years ago, correct?
Yeah, I've been here for 36 years, over
Okay,
36 years.
so you've been citizen of the state of Utah for over 36 years. All
Yes.
right. Who did you vote for in the last election cycle for governor in the Republican primary? If I remember correctly, there was Wright, there was Hughes, there was Huntsman, and there was Cox. Of those four, who did you vote for?
I know it was Wright and Hughes, and I can't remember which was one or two, unfortunately, right this second. But I also really love Rob Bishop, who was running as lieutenant governor of Wright. Those guys were fantastic. I can't believe, that kind of experience, and I can't believe Hughes with his good experience. I just it's unfortunate, in my opinion, that one of those guys didn't win.
I will concur. Um, the When we had the last election cycle with for Senate with Mitt Romney, when the seat was available for Mitt Romney, if I remember correctly, the two main candidates were Mitt Romney and Mike Kennedy. Do you remember who you voted for?
Mike Kennedy. Yeah, there's no question. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll tell you. So I thought that Romney did a great job on the Olympics when he went to California, when he went to Massachusetts and said he was pro-choice. I lost all respect for him right
Oh
there.
yeah.
Oh, come on, you're not pro-choice in Massachusetts, and then pretending like you're going to pretend like you're conservative when you're in Utah.
And then he said the brethren were pro-choice. I was
Yeah,
like, please name one,
yeah, yep,
especially if you're speaking of the 12 or the 3.
yeah.
Because
I didn't even realize he said that. That's interesting.
yeah, he said that on the, go to YouTube and put that in or Google it and it will come up. He did
Yeah.
it on a radio show in Massachusetts. Um, let's see. I'm trying to remember if there's any others. I'm guessing who did you vote for in the presidential cycle 4 years ago?
Oh, it was Trump. Yeah,
All
there's no
right.
question.
You could have given me a like the Constitutional Party or something like that, and I could have accepted that.
It wouldn't have been accurate though.
Okay, well, we appreciate you being accurate. Uh, so on January 6th, was it fair for the Trump supporter? Was it fair for the Trump supporters to be on the grounds? Do you believe on January 6th?
You mean on the Capitol grounds?
Yes.
Well, okay, so this whole thing is so crazy. Let me start by the first part. How in the world is someone like Colorado trying to say that, and other people saying that Trump did something insurrectionist in free speech words that do not equate to what actually people did, boots on the ground people did. Um, you had him actually offering more troops, and they rejected him. So that's the facts. And so the idea that he somehow caused this is a joke. He's exercising his free speech rights. Was there craziness there? Yes. In fact, there was some people like in Utah, the guy that was in charge of Black Lives Matter was actually arrested for doing the kinds of things they claimed that all the Republicans were doing. And so this was a hodgepodge of
Who was that
individuals.
that was arrested for Black Lives Matter?
There was a guy here in Utah. I don't remember his name, but it was pretty well verified that he was arrested, and they probably thought, and I think prosecuted, but they probably thought he was some conservative guy, but he was a very liberal guy. And
Okay,
so
you happen to mention John Sullivan. Is that
is
John
that him?
Sullivan? Pardon me?
That's the guy you're talking about, or what?
Okay, so there was an individual who was in frame who happens to be black right after Ashley Babbitt was shot. That was from the state of Utah. He went there back there with a CNN camera person. Is that who you're speaking of?
I
That
no, I
was.
don't. No, I don't think that's the
Are you
person I'm
talking about
talking.
something totally different?
No, that's someone different. Yeah, and so I think there was, just a hodgepodge of a lot of craziness, and so trying to meander around, who is wrong and who's not wrong, who's exercising legitimately their First Amendment rights. It seemed like that the prosecutions seemed to just want to hone in on anyone they thought was conservative at all, and regardless of really whether there was any harm that they did, and those kinds of things. So yeah, I think there's a whole bunch of misinformation that seemingly the Biden administration wanted to air on these issues.
So we're going to dive down a little bit more on that. We'll come back to that a little bit later. We'll come back to January 6th and some of the issues surrounding it, especially when it comes to the Attorney General. Thoughts on national debt? And we don't really have anything. I know that you don't have a lot to do it, but your thoughts on the national debt?
Well, when I was in high school in Seattle, Washington, I read Milton Friedman, Free to Choose. And if you've ever read that book, you understand that national debt is a bad thing. It's robbing from our children's children, basically. And I'm very much against it. And I think that we need a balanced budget requirement, with the federal government. And instead they do it all backwards. They should pass. They should do at least what Utah does. I think they pass the old last year's budget in January, so that there's never a government shutdown if they can't come to an agreement. That would be a logical thing to do, but we just keep. It's been going out of control, I think, and no one has pushed anything as out of control as Biden has.
Okay, as a state attorney general, is there anything that you can do to affect that you can think of?
Not a lot, except for I do have a position where I can voice my concerns and see this is the impact on Utah, that kind of a thing.
And basically use the bully pulpit. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Your thoughts on abortion?
Well, again, my thoughts. I always tell people that words are cheap. What have you? What have your actions shown? My thoughts on abortion is that no other candidate has fought to protect life but me in this race, and this is what I've done. I filed a brief, first of all, last July to help defend our pro-life laws in Utah. It was argued in September at the Utah Supreme Court, but I've done a lot since then. As I mentioned earlier, I defended pro-life sidewalk counselors in front of an abortion clinic in Salt Lake. They were criminally prosecuted. I defended them. It went to trial. I had to appeal it to the district court, and we won. I didn't charge them
Was
a
that
dime.
federal court or was that state court?
That was city court, and then it went from city to district court. So Salt Lake City was prosecuting these guys. But let me also tell you this. Pro-Life Utah, pregnancy resource centers, just about every kind of pro-life organization in the state has called me free help every time they do. Pro-Life Utah did this about a couple years ago. They called me up, the director, Deanne, and she says, Frank, this woman is going to have an abortion tomorrow unless she can talk to an attorney tonight about issues of adoption. She's very set. She's going to do it. And I had to just reschedule my evening. And I was able to say, I said, bring her to my office, so she would be there with. And we went there, and by God's grace, after talking to her for a couple hours, she agreed not to get an abortion. And actually, she agreed to keep the child. So again, that's kind of in the trenches stuff that I've done, that I do all the time to help pro-life causes.
Well, thank you for being willing to do that.
Go ahead. What else?
And thank you for being willing to do that and rearrange your schedule to save a life.
Did I lose some? Yeah, or are you there?
I am here. Can you not hear me?
Hello?
I can hear you.
Not sure if I'm
Dwayne,
on
can
the
you
air
step
here.
in real quick? Can you hear me?
Ugh. Hello?
Hold on. We can.
I have you both.
Can you
Okay,
hear
great.
Frank?
Frank, you're not hearing us, are you, Frank?
I'm not hearing you at all, so sorry about that. John's frozen. So go ahead and ask me the next question, I guess. But I guess if I can't
Okay.
hear it, then I'm in trouble, right?
I'm not exactly sure. So, Dwayne,
Huh.
I'm
I'm going to try to refresh my browser. Is that a good thing to do?
we'll go ahead and let him refresh
I'm
and
going to
let's
try
see
it.
what happens.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear
us?
you. It
All
works.
right.
Hey,
Can you see me
hey.
now?
I see you and I hear you.
All right. Awesome. Okay, great. All right. Let's get back to it. So, okay, my statement to you was thank you for saving a life. I really
Oh, thanks.
appreciate you going about doing that. Also, real quickly, folks, I want to mention that you are listening to Frank and viewing Frank on KMMU. That's Main Street Media, Utah. You can go to kmmu.org. We're available on X, Rumble, and our website. And I know that I'm leaving one out here. Boy, why am I brain freezing? YouTube. Missed YouTube. Don't know why I missed YouTube. Oh well. I know why, because they're not my favorite. Then the call-in line is 385-899-2134. That's 385-899-2134. And you can go to kmmu.org anytime and see the shows, the numerous shows that we have on. Okay. All right. Let's get to the next one. And click the listen live button on kmmu.org. Let's go to education. Your thoughts on education, and especially how as that pertains to Attorney General.
Absolutely. First of all, I've fought this issue too in the courts on many occasions. I've appeared before school boards and things like that. And I do not believe there should be a U.S. Department of Education at all. I think a lot of the power from the State Board of Education needs to be stripped away and given back to parents. Parents and schools should be the fundamental unit. Teachers need to listen to parents and understand that they are the customers. We homeschooled our kids to about junior high schoolish age. And, I've also helped defend the rights of homeschoolers in the courts and in school boards. It used to be illegal to homeschool without getting permission from the state. And this is, again, where I've put myself on the line. I have actually, back when that was the case, I refused to ask permission, and we just went ahead and homeschooled. That opened me up to a potential Class B misdemeanor where I could have lost my bar license. But I also had Homeschool Legal Defense Association who's endorsed me, or actually Mike Ferris, who started that, endorsed me. And they would have also defended us in that constitutional battle.
Well, let me put it this way. The bar I'm not very happy with for many reasons. I'm not a big fan of the whole idea of the bar, but okay, we'll step aside on that. All right, so this is something that has come up for Utah, will come up for Utah. Let's talk a little bit about big tech. Big tech. So one of the biggest problems that we have with big tech, recently we had the federal government basically saying, TikTok, you're done unless you become a private company divested from China. Your thoughts there. And then I also want to get on to Section 230. I want to hit that as well.
What was the last thing you said?
Section 230.
Okay. So first of all, I don't know. I think is TikTok a problem? Yes. But I don't, you know, I'm really mixed about this whole thing. China is a threat to us. We absolutely have to open our eyes to that. I don't want them buying up all of our land and things like that in our businesses. We should be able to have, laws that protect citizens. That's okay, to do that kind of a thing. And so on one hand, I agree with that. Do we think TikTok is going to be great just because they divest it, from China? I don't think so, actually. I think that there are problems there anyway. So I think to some degree, I think parents, as parents, we need to actually educate our kids on this and know what they're looking at and know what types of things they're involved in. I don't know if that answers your question there or not.
No, that gets us down the right path. Okay, so here's another issue that happened with big tech. So big tech will censor certain people and not censor everything. So basically, for years and years until X came along, excuse me, Elon Musk bought Twitter, and even then, I don't think it's necessarily pure, but they would stop anyone on their free speech. Now, I'm fine with private businesses not allowing people within their organization. Here's the problem. It's like a newspaper
Mhm.
edit, editorializing. They can be sued. Big tech, meaning YouTube, Twitter, Google, and so forth, could not be sued for censoring, but they get the section 230 uh, allows them to be considered uh, a public square, and they even claimed that they were a public square. I want to say both Jack Darcy said this when he was the CEO, and also the Facebook Zach, whatever his name is, the owner of Facebook.
Zuckerberg.
Yes, Zuckerberg. I don't know why I had a brain freeze on that. I guess it's the gray hair. What can I say? But they claimed, hey, we're a public square. Well, the thing with the public square, why that's important to them, the reason why Ma Bell couldn't be sued when the mobster would go out to the phone and use the phone and say, hey, go and take out Big Johnny, was because it was considered the public square. They couldn't be
Mhm.
sued for that.
Yeah.
So their claim was, we can be an editorial, so we shouldn't be sued, but we have the immunity from being sued because we've got Section 230. Any thoughts there?
Well, I don't know all of these issues, just to be fair.
Okay.
I definitely could, learn a lot more about them. I've kind of been in the trenches fighting different constitutional battles, but I will say this, that there's a problem when it's controlled and used hand in hand with the Democratic Party and with Biden in particular. I don't think we've ever seen this kind of a thing before. And the
It's
fact that
never
they
been out in the open, but we've got Project Mockingbird, other different things. But yes, it's not as quite a been out in the open. I agree.
well, and even working with the FBI, again, this kind of thing is really huge and a concern. And so I think they've clearly overstepped the line on some of these things, and they can't have it both ways. They can't say on one hand, no, 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 we're private, no, 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 we're, you can't sue us, but then they're going to go overboard in these other areas. So I think that they simply can't have it both ways. It can't be weaponized by one party, against the other. That's all there is to it.
Um, okay, over 66% of Utah is owned by the federal government.
Hmm.
As Attorney General, what are your thoughts there and how you might be able to affect things?
Absolutely. So I would go back to how several states in this country became uh, states, and actually get back to that history and basically say, look, there was a lot of states were handled differently. They were handled in such a way that they gave them land that the federal government had been kind of holding on to. It seemed like that happened to just about everyone except Utah and Nevada. And Nevada is even in a worse situation. But I've also had the opportunity to look at some of these lands from the airplane, and especially when they were saying roads were not really roads, and you could actually see that they in fact are roads, and that they're actually restricting more and more use. Um, you're seeing this with ranchers. They're in terms of cattle. You're seeing it in terms of uh, the one case I'm involved in is the railroad in eastern Utah, where they're trying to just prevent you know waxy crude oil from being transported, even though it's way more environmentally friendly in the unlikelihood of a derailment, because it won't seep into the ground, because it's like wax. It's like paraffin wax. They have to heat it to get it in, and yet there's just these nickel and diming, trying to say no. The EPA who already signed off on it, saying that there's no environmental issue. You get the Court of Appeals saying no. They have more authority. They need to look at hypotheticals. They need to look, and so this is a battle that I'm already involved in fighting, and I really believe it needs a huge full court press in every aspect. We need to fight first control, law enforcement, ranchers, use by outdoor enthusiasts, like which I'm one of, and people that like to camp. We're getting kicked off our own land. This is just wrong, and we need to return a lot of it to state and county ownership instead of federal government ownership, because there's just no reason on a lot of the land that the federal government is keeping title to it.
I agree. Well, bottom line is, I think it's the state of Utah, and it should go all divert back to the state.
Yep.
To me, that would be my answer to the solution. And I would love to have a governor, an AG, and sheriffs that would stand up and say, EPA, you come 1 foot in the state of Utah to affect anything that is within the state of Utah, we will arrest you and we will stick you in the gulags, and you will have the worst. We may not be able to directly torture you, but we're going to feed you like stale bread. Not moldy bread, but we will give you, and we'll give you like generic peanut butter and
Right.
generic jelly. Okay. Is it? So I want to go back to January 6th, and even some of the things around January 6th. Was it fair for Trump supporters to ask if Trump had actually won the election or not?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's fair for anyone to say that, period. Apparently, it was okay for Hillary Clinton to say that the election was stolen from her in 2016, but it wasn't okay for President Trump and supporters to suggest that on January 6th. So there's some incongruencies there in terms of how this whole thing is treated. So first, and also secondly, free speech should be still considered free speech. Everyone should be able to speak their mind about any number of issues. But it would be foolish just to leave it there. We look at Georgia. Georgia flipped from a red state to a blue state in 4 years, one election cycle. And they had the worst and sloppiest election procedures probably in the country. And even where Biden was from, Delaware, had much stronger ones. And then you've got the National Baseball League that's saying, "Oh, we're not going to go to Atlanta because they now they have laws that are like Delaware." They didn't say like Delaware, but that's the truth. Oh, they have laws like Denver, so we're going to be okay with it in Denver, but not because Georgia passed this law. And so we need to honestly, especially as technology increases, we need to get a handle on whether what's going on in these elections, because we're in a dangerous situation of people losing trust, and also for everything flipping blue by a technological switch. And so we do not want that to happen. We need to start getting better procedures and verification of voting. And if we can't do it, let's do it the old-fashioned way and count ballots.
I would concur. Okay, so I want to drill down a little bit more on January 6th. So something that just happened. We had a state to the next door to us. We had a lady, a 71-year-old grandma, was found guilty in Washington D.C.
Wow.
for offenses in because she was there on January 6th because she went into the Capitol. She did nothing wrong. And so here's my question. As a citizen of the state of Utah, I had some friends invite me to go back with them for January 6th, and for whatever reason, I didn't do it.
Well, you
And I'm
probably
glad
gotten
I
arrested
didn't.
too. After
I would have been one of the ones. So as soon as they opened the doors at the Capitol, I'm like, they opened the doors,
Mhm.
okay, from the inside.
Usually that means you can go in.
That means you can go in. And they didn't say, hey, do not come in. They let them come in. So my point is, what can a attorney general do? Because there's a number of things that happen they're happening back there. First of all, they're being tried in Washington D.C.
Yep.
95% of the people in Washington D.C. that could be on the jury trial, 95% of them we know voted for Biden, not for Trump.
Yep.
That's not fair. Two, the government, we know for a fact, is not giving full disclosure. They have yet to release all of the video evidence, the thousands of hours. We only have a couple thousand hours that have been released. Secondly, the private individuals with their own mobile phones were not able to bring in that information in for these jury trials.
That's
so we have
crazy.
the government withholding evidence and
Yeah.
not allowing defense to bring in evidence that they have on
Yeah.
what they did. So what can a attorney general do to say, well, should we go ahead and extradite people back to Washington, citizens of the state of Utah, with those type of situations?
Yeah, I mean, it's fair for a state to actually look at what's being asked, and if there's like exculpatory evidence that's not being allowed, that's a constitutional violation, actually. And if there's those kinds of issues, if whether there's fairness at all that can be had, in terms of the jury pool, all those are important issues. Now, I've actually worked on this kind of an issue before, because I had a case that was a parental rights case, and the other person that was seeking to have custody was not a parent, and they were not married, and a judge in Utah gave rights to this other person that she lived with, and ordered parenting time, and she finally fled to Texas, and I had to get in touch with the Texas Attorney General at that time. It wasn't Paxton. It was this happened in 2007. And he agreed, thankfully. He says, I will not extradite because this is not a final order. We wouldn't do that until the Utah Supreme Court actually gives a ruling. I won at the Utah Supreme Court. A very important parental rights decision is Jones v. Barlow. And so it really depends on who the state attorney general is in those instances. Also, in the Parker Jensen case, I was involved in that when they had to flee. And I actually withdrew so that they could flee, and the court couldn't bring me into court and try to hold them in contempt or something. And so I actually withdrew during that window. And the Attorney General of Idaho at that point was unwilling to extradite over this parental rights violation issue. And so it's huge. It's huge, the position of an Attorney General in the state. So yes, you could affect that.
Okay, so here's my question. Are you willing to tell the federal government any warrants that you want to serve for arrest for here in the state of Utah? I want to see them.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they have anything to do with January 6th.
Absolutely.
Okay, are you willing to do that?
Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Immigration. What are your thoughts on immigration?
Well, it's immigration is just it's been an outrageous problem. It was a national debate topic when I was in college in 1980, and it literally was the national debate topic. But there's something more evil and sinister about it over the last 10 years, especially during the Biden administration. It's gone bonkers. To these are evil, wicked people, oftentimes that are actually crossing the border or negotiating and holding them ransom to pay outrageous sums to help people cross the border. I mean, you've got the cartels that are in this. They're butchering people if they don't pay, or butchering
Well, there's
family
rape
members.
trees. There's rape
Well,
trees
yep, yep. And there's
right
so
on the border.
the evil that's going on should be considered an outrageous human rights abuses. Number one, and it's not. It's not being categorized as that. But I plan on stopping the flights, the bus loads, car transportation. I'll go to the legislature and ask them to make it a felony for anyone to bring into this state an illegal alien. I'll tell you that will immediately stop all the buses
Okay,
and
when
the
you say
pilots.
anyone, who do you specifically speak of? And
It,
I think you're starting to go down that rabbit hole, so forgive me for interrupting.
aiding or abetting. So if you're a pilot, if you're the flight crew, and you've got people on there that you know are illegal aliens, then you are going to face a felony in Utah. I can guarantee you that none of that flight crew, including the pilot, is going to set foot in Utah with illegal aliens, knowing that they could lose their federal license to fly.
Uh, I'm sure there's a few bus drivers that wouldn't want to do that either.
I think
Okay,
there's a lot.
so who else would you, so you said aid or abet. Okay, so that means what about the NGOs that are putting them on, or the
Yep,
federal government that's loading up
yep.
these planes?
I don't care who it is. It's an individual too, right? It's you arrest those individuals and it will and yeah, that's a great question. It may be going after the organization as well.
Yeah, because you have NGOs that are giving them money to put them on those flights, and you have the federal government. Once they get to a blue city, they wind up flying them to red areas.
Yeah, yep.
Is in the news. Okay, um, I don't know if I'll be coming back to that or not, but Second Amendment. What are your thoughts on the Second Amendment, and especially red flag issues?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, again, I've been in the trenches protecting the Second Amendment. That's how you can trust me that I'm going to do it again. I helped a couple who he had a concealed weapons permit and was denied a foster care license in Salt Lake County by the state. It was the state human services that denied him that foster care license. I got involved
Why
representing.
was he denied the foster care
Oh,
license?
sorry. I forgot to say the only reason it was denied was because he had a concealed weapons permit. He actually said he would lock. He had a safe. He showed him the safe and says, if we have a foster care child, I'll have it locked in the safe. Nope. Still, they denied it. And so I got involved, represented him, got his license back, and the state of Utah had to pay my attorney fees because when you vindicate someone's civil rights, that's what they have to do. So
That's
some of these,
awesome.
yeah.
That's
So
fantastic.
some of these cases, I haven't charged the client a dime, but I still got paid. In some of these parental rights cases, I end up getting paid by the state because that's what they have to do. But
Hopefully,
beyond
they
that,
paid you $1,000 an hour.
but in any event, I will say this, that Mitch Velos has endorsed my campaign. He's the gun rights guy in Utah because he knows I've been in the trenches fighting these issues for years. He wrote the book Utah Gun Laws, and he's the key gun rights attorney in the state. Kurt Oda, who was the gun rights guy in the legislature, has also endorsed my campaign and working for me quite heavily. I've been shooting guns since I was 5 years old in Montana. I shot a 357 Magnum, 410 shotgun, 22, and 38 specials. And, we had a radio station in Deer Lodge, Montana, that was a couple miles from town. And so, this is something I've done for years. I've done it with my children when they're adults and younger, with my wife. And so we've all done these things. So I have had a concealed weapons permit for years. Back when I had to show cause, believe it or not, and because some prisoners didn't like me very well, believe it or not. So this is a passion of mine that I've always been a pro Second Amendment person. When I ran in 2000, I had all the conservative gun rights people that were endorsing my campaign back then as well.
How often will you meet with the public?
Well, that's a great question. I'll meet as much as it makes sense to, I suppose. I would love to have some sort, there's an Ask the Governor show. I think there should be like an Ask the Attorney General show, and some things like that, because people are going to want to understand, hey, what
The
about
problem
my
with the
rights?
Ask the Governor show is it's guarded by the very liberal groups.
That's
Um,
true, but I could do it in a different way. I don't know, but maybe there's some way to be able to allow it not to just be some one network that's trying to, vet everything. I
how
don't
about you
know.
make a commitment to come on KMMU with and
Yeah,
talk with
that would
Trump
that would be great.
every couple of months?
Yeah, that would be great. But I also want to have like an ombudsman or somebody like that, or that actually looks at people's real issues and gets back to them, because I hear that sometimes people make complaints to the AG's office and it's a black hole. They just never hear back. And I don't want that happening.
Okay. Economy. I realize that's maybe more legislative and executive office, but any thoughts on the economy,
Well,
especially as how it relates to the Attorney General?
well, it doesn't relate a lot, except for I will say this, that when and I've always had this belief that if we did something wrong, or denied someone their rights in some way, we should pay some just compensation. On the other hand, most of the time we do not do stuff wrong, like when the police is sued, and I mean the sheriffs and law enforcement. I don't think we should settle those. There's been a lot of settlement of cases at the state AG's office that I would never think about settling. I mean, they call chump change as $80,000 for a guy that did nothing wrong, an AP&P agent. This is an actual case I was involved in. I've seen cities do the same thing sometimes, throw around city of Saratoga Springs, threw out $900,000 for a case I would have defended. We would have gone to court and we would have won that thing. And so I
I'm
don't want
assuming you're
to.
talking about the man that was carrying around the sword that
Yes,
was
it was
shot.
a samurai sword, and they made it sound in the media like it was a toy sword. No, no, no. This was metal. There was no way a cop could know that this wasn't a real samurai sword. And even if it wasn't, it's metal. You could still do some damage, even if it's not completely as sharp as a samurai sword. So, there's sometimes we're throwing away money right and left, and that encourages more lawsuits, frivolous lawsuits. And so I'm really keen on making sure that we're not throwing away money. If we did something wrong, we pay. But so I am fiscally conservative, and I certainly would run the budget the same way.
What's your thoughts on jury nullification?
This is an interesting issue. I think that there has to be a constitutional basis. I think you can't just have a jury just disregarding laws willy-nilly. There needs to be some constitutional basis for this. I do not have a lot of examples that I could use where that would actually occur. I do know that that it's very difficult to invade the minds of a jury, but you are supposed to be judged by a jury of your peers, and that means they should be applying the Constitution in every case that they decide.
Legislative nullification. Any thoughts there?
I'm not as quite up on that one, and I think it would be the same principle. That is there a constitutional violation with this, or is it contrary to the Constitution, this legislative enactment? And usually that results in a lawsuit, or should result in a lawsuit in one way or another. I will say this, that as Attorney General, anytime there's a lawsuit that raises a constitutional claim or an issue regarding a Utah statute, the AG's office actually has the right to intervene. And I did that when I was in the AG's office as an assistant AG, intervened into a private suit to clarify Utah statute. So that's something you can lead out on in a practical way, even though it's private litigation.
All right. State nullification.
I'm not actually familiar with that. I apologize.
So, for instance, say the federal government happens to do some kind of bill along, and it could be along the lines of, say, the state. Well, several years ago, the state of Utah said marriage was between a man and woman, and then it went to federal court, and the federal court said it happened to be a gay judge that made the decision that that was an illegal bill.
Yeah.
Went all the way to the Supreme Court. Well, what if the governor decides to say, well, okay, federal government, I appreciate that the opinion that was given by the Supreme Court for this specific case, well, it applies to this specific case, but bottom line is we're not going to honor it on the rest. Or bottom line is we're just going to defy it. In the state of Utah, we will not allow, and that is, and it's not just for, and to my audience and those that may be listening, it's not just for that one specific situation. It could be, hey, the state wants to nullify any decision by the federal government that is outside the bounds of the limited, when it comes to the Constitution of the United States of America, it is not in the document that they have specific rights to. Are you willing to fight for? The state says we are going to just go gun bans, for instance, or magazine bans.
Right. No, I would definitely
great for bringing that up.
Yeah, I'd definitely be willing to fight for these kinds of issues, and to some degree, we arguably should be on every one of these executive orders as well as administrative orders. There's a lot of talk sometimes about the U.S. Supreme Court maybe overturning the Chevron doctrine, which is a terrible doctrine that allows giving deference to agencies to make laws by bureaucrats, federal bureaucrats, which is even worse. And so, yeah, I would definitely help champion those kinds of fights.
Okay. All right. So we are just about done. Well, we've covered all 23 questions. So well done. We're at 5:32, but I have a few more questions that are specific to your position as State Attorney General. So one thought that I've heard you say is you've protected the government when they're being sued by someone.
Yes.
Here's my question to you.
Mm-hmm.
Where is it your job? Is your number one job to protect the citizen or to protect the state?
It's the citizen, hands down. I don't work for the state. That sounds like Hegel or something. Where he makes it sound like the state's the most important thing. I do not believe that. It's the people, and the Constitution is to protect the people. Is to limit the federal government. Our U.S. Constitution and our state constitution should limit the state government, so to allow people's rights to flourish. So I have operated as an assistant AG, as a private attorney representing counties and cities and towns in a way that promotes justice. That means one of the reasons I wanted to work for the Attorney General's office is I didn't want to represent someone like that was a sex offender. I didn't want to represent some guy that's on the wrong side of the law. But one thing you can do as a prosecutor that people don't realize, if you don't have valid grounds, you can actually dismiss the case. You're in charge. It's called prosecutorial discretion. And in fact, that should happen if there's not valid grounds to bring the charges. You might have thought there was, and you get into it, I've dismissed cases when I was in the AG's office, criminal cases under those reasons, and civil prosecution cases as well. Now, there's also the civil cases where, as I mentioned before, I've always believed that if we did something wrong, we should compensate. And I've stood up to agencies saying, look, we screwed up here. This is what we need to do, because they had respect in me, because they knew I fought hard when we were in the right. They respected when I said that. And so one of the reasons I've enjoyed, and like I said, enjoyed working in the Attorney General's office for 12 years, but then also representing sheriffs, I have that luxury. You don't always have that luxury in the private realm. Sometimes you have to represent somebody and you realize they're not such a great client. You're stuck with them, usually, with some exceptions. But so that is something that I love and worked and actually practiced as a public attorney. So yes, it's even more so on my mind as the Attorney General.
So how do you delineate I'm going to represent a citizen against, and I'm not talking about the federal government, I'm talking about state, county, city, I don't know what would be underneath city, but I mean, those three levels of government, or any within the state of Utah, how do you how do you delineate I need to take the citizen position over the state, city, or county position?
So all positions are the citizen position in my mind. So if I'm representing the state, it should be because of sound reasoning that I'm actually representing the citizens and not throwing away our money. But if in fact, like a school board kicks someone out for their free speech, saying, let's go Brandon, and somehow they're kicked out of their school board meeting, I'm going to tell that school board, you're violating his constitutional rights. You can't do that. You need to take that off right now, that banning that person from a meeting. These kinds of things have happened. They happened in Virginia, but they've actually happened here in Utah. So that's
And I actually want to go down that rabbit hole.
okay.
So how about this? We'll go down the rabbit hole. And if you've actually, I'm going to let you finish your thought, and then I'm going to give you a specific situation scenario.
Oh, I think I'm fine. Go ahead.
Okay. The Alpine School Board closed because a bunch of citizens were unhappy with their position, and they didn't like the Alpine School Board didn't like what was being said. They closed a meeting.
Wow.
Now, that is, first of all, it's against state law or state statute. They broke the law. So that was number one. Now, I've talked to a few people that are running for your office and say, can't you guys go after Alpine School District? And they said, well, actually, Alpine School District is a client of ours, so we can't, go after them. What are your thoughts?
No, that's simply not true. I mean, they are a client, that's true, but they're not a client in that regard. First of all, any claim that's filed against the state needs to be looked at as through the lens of justice. And that you look at the people. Are we violating someone's constitutional rights? We shouldn't play games, if we are. Now, like the case that I have right now, that's in federal district court. Like I said, I'm actually in the middle of a 2-week jury trial, where the plaintiffs want 3.2 million. And we don't really believe the sheriff's office actually did anything wrong. We do believe there were some rogue officers that did some things wrong. We do not think we're liable for it, but we certainly do not think that anywhere near is 3.2 million. So we're going to fight the case. We're going to let the jury decide what do they think this case is worth. That's actually a fair thing to do. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But when you're talking about a case where there is constitutional violations, that throws it into a different realm. Then,
because with this specific situation, I can't remember if it happened in Alpine or Highland, where the actual meeting was at. The city is doing nothing about this. It's not, arresting any of the school board members. The county's not doing anything about it, and the state has said, I'm not going to do anything about it.
Well, the state's the one that should do it. The school district does come under the rubric of the Attorney General's office. They defend lawsuits, and they also are over any agency counsel. So even though sometimes there's attorneys that work for different, for the state school board and some things like that, they can't override what the attorney general says. And so that's where sometimes we need to step in as attorney general and say, look, you need to resolve this. This is not right. You cannot kick someone out for exercising their free speech rights.
So they shut down the whole meeting. So
Yeah.
there's two more pieces to this puzzle for this specific situation. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, and I'm pretty sure I'm aware of the scenario, but I think it's worth bringing up because it's a greater speaks about many things that can happen within government
Yeah.
and how an AG separates. So
Yep.
they close the doors. Two things happen. There were people that went out to their cars and started honking their horns, and the police department came along and said, we're going to arrest you guys for honking your horns.
Wow. So that's another free speech issue that should be, looked at as they're doing that in relationship to their rights being denied.
Protesting their
Yeah.
government for regress of
Yeah.
grievances.
Yep.
Okay. And then secondly, there was an individual that started knocking on the door and was actually arrested for a misdemeanor. I believe it's a misdemeanor.
Wow.
He was
Okay.
actually arrested because he knocked on the doors to say, let us in. You're first of all, you've shut down the meeting. You've not done it properly. It was not at the end of the meeting time, and you've locked us out. And he was actually arrested.
Wow.
And he's gone to the AG's office, and they're saying, like, we represent a Pine School District.
Yeah, that's a cop out. That's what that is. Yeah. So here's understand this. There are things that they called in the AG's office a Chinese wall. And what that means legally from an attorney perspective is if you have different attorneys on different sides, you create separations of authority that go up and keep it literally separate. So over here, you could be prosecuting something. Over here, you could be defending. You could give agency counsel over here and still be defending a civil suit. And so, but the practical thing is, and one thing I would do is I would haul these guys into my office and say, what are you guys doing? You can't just violate someone's constitutional rights. And that's similar to what I do with Alliance Defending Freedom when they send a letter to a school board or to a principal and say, you can't deny these students their constitutional rights because you don't like their speech, because it's conservative speech or religious speech. And many times, and I've done this with universities too, through Alliance Defending Freedom, and they often will cave when they are confronted with the law.
Well, I have run out all of my questions that I have for you. I want to say thank you for joining us. So,
Absolutely.
Go ahead. Is there anything that we've missed or you'd like to speak to about why someone should vote for Frank and Frank Mylar for Attorney General for the state of Utah? Anything else that you would like to make for your case?
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's just so many of these issues that I mentioned. There's the pro-life issues. There's fighting pornography. I didn't really say much about that. I'm concerned about AG opinions, including the one that's protecting children from pornography, that they seem to be based upon some liberal, non-precedential U.S. Supreme Court opinions that do not have precedent. I'm going to start reining in some of those opinions, making sure they're valid and constitutional. So there's a number of things like that. I want people to know that I've actually been a civil rights attorney. This isn't something that's speculative. It is speculative of the others. And although it's excellent that one candidate has defended school districts, as have I in the AG's office, that's not what I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about I've sued the state, I've sued police departments, I've sued Division of Child and Family Services and won 3 substantial judgments on behalf of my client. I don't think there's many attorneys in the state, let alone my competitors, who have ever done that. So if you want an attorney that's really going to fight and it's not going to be a bunch of hot air and smoke and mirrors, then you need to look at what I've actually done in the past. And so please look at what I've done in the past, because the good experience that I have in fighting these matters is part of who I am. I'm not going to run for some other office. I'm a convention-only candidate. You need to know that. because I believe in the convention system. And so I would appreciate your support. I need your support. I want to get the 60% margin, so the state will have to declare me as the Republican candidate in case I have a primary with somebody buying signatures. Thanks.
Okay. Last question for you.
Great.
Where can people go if they want to donate to your campaign? I want you to state again clearly where they would go to donate, or how they should reach out to you, especially state delegates at this time.
Absolutely. So you can go to Frank Mylar 4AG .com, as it's actually, I think, listed there in the private chat. So Frank Mylar 4AG.com. There's actually a donation button right as you open my webpage. And so all you have
Right
to do
at
is
the
click.
top, we happen to be running a cursor over it right now, but
Yep.
yes.
And so that's the easiest way. Also, yes, I accept checks. You can also email me at Mylar 4AG @gmail.com. That will go to my campaign. I try to review all of those. So if you have questions, if you want to, send a check in the mail, those are all good. I've had people send checks in the mail. I've had people send me Venmo because for different reasons, they might not want to go through the website. So those are all good. At Frank, I think it's at Frank-Mylar is my Venmo. But you can see a picture that looks kind of like that one there on the website that you're showing right now. So that would be very, very helpful, because I'm not taking money from special interests, from lobbyists, from corporations. Some of my competitors have different lobbying groups paying two different candidates that are in this race. That's crazy. I guess they're hedging their bets against the two of them. But I don't take money, because who gives you money helps own you. And I don't want to be owned by any organization.
Well, any organization wants to give Talk with John money, just reach out to me on my Twitter. I'll gladly figure out a way to make that happen.
Great.
For me, that is, for Talk with John. But I think that's a very principled position, Frank. I really appreciate you taking that. All right. So if there isn't any other thoughts that you have to share, any other things that you want to make sure you get across before we're going to let you go, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on Talk with John. Thank you for being a part of this. I hope we can get you back on. And let me ask you this. And our lowly call screener is here. He wants to say thank you for coming in. And I want to say thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this. Should you get into either the primary or into the general election, would you be willing to come back here and make your pitch again to why
Absolutely.
you should be? All right, excellent.
Love
and
to.
Then should you wind up becoming the Attorney General, I hope you'll come on every couple of months on Talk with John, and we'll have questions for you then.
That'd be great.
All right. And as Dwayne says, when he gets to the primaries. Okay,
right.
Very well stated. All right, Dwayne, my call screener, thank you so much. Frank, thank you for your time. I appreciate you being here today. God bless. We will. I'll be posting this on Twitter, and we look forward to interacting with you more, Frank. Take care.
Thank you. We'll see you. Bye.
All right. Folks, this has been Talk with John. I want to say thank you so much for joining me here today. It's been my privilege and pleasure to have you and Frank Mylar joining us today. We will be back next Tuesday, roughly from 4 to 6. I'm bouncing out a little bit early because my allergies are kicking my tail. So thank you for your time. Have a great day, and we'll see you next week.